Now, as we've been hearing, the events of the last few hours have overshadowed the Egyptian President Sisi's visit to the United Kingdom. It's today. Mr Cameron will meet the Egyptian President this afternoon, though the President's human rights record has made many people uneasy about the visit. Here's Joko with more.
President Sisi arrived in the UK last night for his controversial visit. David Cameron argues it's in Britain's interest to have a stable Egypt to help halt the spread of extremism in the region. The Egyptian leader led the army's overthrow of the democratically elected Muslim Brotherhood's Mohamed Morsi in 2013, following mass protests. Since then, more than 1,000 people have been killed and 40,000 are believed to have been jailed in a crackdown on dissent. President Sisi has told the BBC that there is a roadmap for real democracy in Egypt and argues that the threat from militants means a crackdown is needed. The problem is particularly acute in Egypt's Sinai region, which is also home to the heavily guarded and lucrative resort of Sharm el-Sheikh, where the plane crashed and where the UK has suspended flights. David Cameron may be willing to help President Sisi with reports this morning that he will announce new curbs on Muslim Brotherhood activity in the UK, although how tough they'll be remains to be seen. Jeremy Corbyn said yesterday that the Prime Minister's invitation to the Egyptian President showed contempt for human and democratic rights and threatens rather than protects Britain's national security. Speaking in the Commons a short while ago, the Foreign Office Minister, Tobias Ellwood, said David Cameron would be bringing up human rights issues during the meeting.
It is no secret that we want to see more political progress in Egypt, better protection of Egyptians' constitutional rights, freedom of expression, more space for NGOs and civil society. These rights and freedoms are essential for Egypt's long-term stability. But megaphone diplomacy is not the way to succeed in putting our views across effectively. Instead, we need to treat each other as real partners and have frank and honest conversations. The visit provides an opportunity for the Prime Minister to emphasise his desire to see more political progress in Egypt.
We're sticking with Egypt. It's the biggest story of the day, if not the week. Joining me now, the Conservative MP and former Defence Minister Gerald Howarth. He now chairs the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Egypt. And Tim Marshall, the former Foreign Affairs Editor of Sky News. Welcome to you both. Let me start with some basics. Tim, how bad is the human rights situation in Egypt?
As bad as it's ever been under all the previous leaders, including President Morsi, who was overthrown, including President Mubarak, who was overthrown. There's a continuum. Under the current president, the judiciary is being co-opted. There is massive pressure on journalists to toe the party line, and torture remains routine. It is no better or worse than it was before the misnamed Arab Spring.
So it's like the days under Mubarak and under Nasser? Pretty much.
The slight difference is although they had the quasi-democracy under Mubarak, where they pretended to vote and pretended to count the votes, they really did have a vote for this guy, and they really did vote for him. 96% voted for this president.
Do we believe that figure?
More or less. I mean, you can massage it a bit, but a clear majority, even if it wasn't 96%, voted for him because after the turmoil of 2011, 2012, 2013, they wanted the strongman back. And they voted for the strongman, and they've got the strongman, and he's, well, you could say being strong. It's as it was.
And I take it that the government has been further encouraged or facilitated in its clampdown by this developing terrorist situation in the northern Sinai. Could you explain how these two are, first of all, how bad is it in the Sinai and how it's linked to the domestic situation?
When the Muslim Brotherhood was overthrown in a military coup by this guy, which is essentially what it was, with popular support, the Muslim Brotherhood has then been suppressed and put completely underground, and therefore large sections of it have turned to terror. There's a ready-made terrorist organisation already there. They used to be called the Supporters of Jerusalem, and they've now sworn affinity with Islamic State, so they're now called Sinai Province. The worst of it is in North Sinai. There's at least 1,500 fighters there who've signed allegiance to IS, which of course takes you to a potential attack on Russia and on tourism. You collapse tourism and you really, really damage Egypt into that vacuum you try and step. And it has spread from northern Sinai into some of the major cities, but very sporadically. Most of it is in the northern Sinai, but there you've had a Croatian hostage beheaded, you've had numerous attacks on army checkpoints, and you've had one very serious attack this year where 13 different positions were attacked simultaneously, and that takes training. It's a proper insurgency in the north of the Sinai.
So, thank you for that. Gerald Howarth, we have to deal with lots of governments. That's what being in government means, and we often don't like these governments. But from what we hear from Tim and the crackdown that's been taking place in Egypt, shouldn't we be supping with a long spoon?
Well, we've just had the President of the People's Republic of China here, and we know what their record on human rights is. We know what their record is on cyber attack on this country and around the world. So it is entirely right that the British government has invited President Sisi to come here. Egypt is a very important component in regional stability. Egypt has made a big contribution to trying to resolve the Arab-Israeli problem. That is a continuing problem. And they face a real threat, as Tim has outlined, and we face the same threat, and they're trying to deal with it. And I think the United Kingdom is extremely well placed to help in counter-terrorism.
So we should be helping Sisi?
We should be helping Sisi, absolutely. And
really?
Whilst we, it's clear, of course, that the human rights issue is important and the Prime Minister must deal with it. But would we have liked people telling us how to deal with Northern Ireland when we had internment without trial and issues like that? We faced a terror threat.
People did tell us.
Yeah, not many people from outside, except perhaps the United States. Those in Chicago, I think, had a voice.
All right, so, but I just want to clear, because I want to bring Diane in. But you think it's not just that it's not just enough to sup with a long spoon. You think we should be an ally of Sisi?
We should be an ally, because if Egypt goes down, this is the most populous country in Egypt by a mile. They have a population of about 90 million. The next largest is Saudi Arabia, with a third of that. They have millennia of experience. And as a cultural centre in the Middle East, they're very influential.
Okay, I get the point.
Alongside.
All right, Diane Abbott. We don't need to like this government. We often don't get to choose what governments we like and don't like. Egypt, as Mr. Howarth says, it's probably the most important Arab country in the Middle East. It's certainly the country that the rest of the Middle East looks to for culture and all the rest of it. We have to deal with it.
Yes, but I think it was wrong to issue this particular invitation. However, the invitation has been issued. He's coming now. And I think, as well as discussing, what's happened in Sharm el-Sheikh and the important geopolitical considerations, we also have to have a dialogue about human rights.
So we should be speaking to him?
We shouldn't have issued the invitation, but in practice, if we are going to resolve some of the problems in the region, we will have to talk to people who we may not particularly
including
like.
Mr. Sisi?
Possibly even President Assad, but we'll come to that later.
Well, we will in a minute. But Mr. Corbyn, your leader, argued that President Sisi's presence in the UK threatened our national security. Why?
The leader of the Labour Party was opposed to the invitation, and so was I.
But why does it threaten our national security?
I think this is a kind of tightrope. It could be that by being seen to support a leader with such a horrible record on human rights, we create instability. It's a judgment, and it's a tightrope.
That's right, but that would be a case for not talking to him at all. That's not a matter of timing. If he's a threat to our national security, we shouldn't be talking to him at all by Mr. Corbyn's lights, not that just the timing's unfortunate.
No, I think the argument about these official invitations, whether it's China or whether it's Sisi, is that by offering that level of acknowledgement, it's almost like you're rubber stamping their human rights. That's their human rights atrocities.
But we're talking about human rights. If he wasn't here, we probably wouldn't be talking. I mean, explain to me the logic that Mr. Corbyn doesn't want to talk to Sisi because of his human rights record, but has always been very happy, indeed, to call them his friends, Hezbollah, Hamas, talk to the IRA. Look at their human rights record. Look at Hamas's human rights record. Why would you talk to them?
I don't think anyone is literally saying we shouldn't talk to Sisi. The argument
Well,
is...
your leader said he was a threat to national security.
Do we award him the honour of this visit? If we are going to resolve some of the things that are happening in the world, we will all, including Gerald, have to talk to people that we don't particularly like.
I mean, let's look at the record of the Iranian government. Its human rights record is just as bad as Egypt's. We know that they have regular hangings of homosexuals. They've been others have thrown people off buildings. Should we not talk to them?
None of the problems in the region will be solved without talking to some major regional players.
Doesn't that include Egypt?
Like Egypt, like Iran, who in particularly in relation to human rights, we do not like. We will have to talk to these people, just as in the end we have to talk to the Irish nationalists.
Well, Diane's made the case as why we should be talking, and I'm very sorry that your leader is not on the same page as you are, Diane.
No, it's... Our point, and I signed a letter to this effect, our point was about this invitation. Not that at no point and in no place...
So it's only about timing?
It's about this invitation. But of course...
But hasn't the timing turned out to be fortuitous because of what happened with this plane come out of Sharm el-Sheikh? It has brought to the attention there is a serious terrorist capability in the Sinai Desert, with terrorists linked to the people we're fighting with our bombing raids in Iraq and are active in Syria. It would seem to me putting the human rights record aside, I perfectly understand that. Now's not a bad time to talk to the Egyptian president.
We're going to have to communicate with him, yes.
We are?
Of course, at every level.
Can I just, there's two extra elements I'd like to put in. One is that after the misnamed Arab Spring, we've seen what happens when we get dragged in and we won't deal with people. We didn't know what was going on in Afghanistan, got dragged in and then kicked out. Iraq, similar. The current government got us involved in Libya, said it would stand shoulder to shoulder with the Libyan people and then walked away. Well, this is the guy that runs the biggest country that's next to Libya. They have a cross-border dispute and problems and terrorism. Do we really not want to talk to him about the Libyan situation? Absolutely. Do we really not want to talk to him about all the different things? And also, can you imagine if Egypt went the same way as these other countries? And there are Coptic Christians there, tens of millions of them, well, about 12 million of them. If Egypt, God forbid, went down that road, those 12 million Christians would be in a serious amount of trouble.
They run the risk of being massacred.
Yeah. So do you want to engage with this guy and find out what the hell is going on inside Egypt, or do you just want to say, I'm not talking to you?
Why, though? I know you need to get away, so let me this final question.
We have a statement from the Secretary of State for Transport.
I understand, so let me be quick. Is it really seemly, though, for Mr Cameron to be announcing that he's cracking down on the Muslim Brotherhood here, the arch enemies of Mr Sisi, while the president's here? Is that really the right thing to do?
I don't think he's doing
Isn't that a bit playing to the gallery?
There's been a review done of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United Kingdom, and that review is about to be produced. I'm sure that his visit is a good opportunity to do that, because clearly he took over from Morsi. I mean, the idea that Morsi is somehow some kind of saint. No, he is not. He was not a saint. The man suspended the constitution.
I don't think anybody said he's a saint. Joko's the only saint on this program.
well, I couldn't dissent from that. But I mean, Tim set out, the history of Egypt. It's not been a happy history. Here is an opportunity for the United Kingdom, which knows the region. Everybody tells me, when I go as a minister, when I visited the region, what they say to me is, we don't expect the Americans to understand. We do expect you to be to understand. You've been here for 200 years. Let's seize the opportunity for Britain to influence Egypt for the good and help the region to boot.
We understood it so well that not one of our highly paid ambassadors or diplomatic camel corps predicted the Arab Spring. But we'll leave it there, Mr. Howe. Thank you very much. Tim Marshall, good to have you back too.
Thank you.
Well, with concerns that terrorist activity...